Hello, my name is Nelson Chamba, and this is my third and final narrated presentation about schizophrenia. To start things off, we'll talk about what schizophrenia is. Now, the text definition is a psychotic disorder in which person, social, and occupational functioning deteriorate as a result of unusual perceptions, odd thoughts, disturbed emotions, and motor abnormalities. Now, when it comes to college classes, we all know that one person, or maybe ourselves, that feels this way. So it happens to everyone. You take a psychology class and you feel that you may have that disorder. You're diagnosing yourself with that disorder because the symptoms may sound similar to how you feel sometimes. But with schizophrenia, it's a little bit different. It's more extreme than how others might perceive it. So let's get into how you can be diagnosed if you have schizophrenia. According to the DSM-5, during a 1 month period, you need to at least show two types of symptoms in order to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, in terms of symptoms, there's two types of symptoms. The positive symptoms, not necessarily the good kind, and the negative symptoms that you can have when you have schizophrenia. So when I say positive symptoms, those are usually additions to a person's behavior. Additions such as hallucinations, heightened perception, or disordered speech. Hallucinations, people have a common misconception that they're just visuals. They just believe that the person sees things that are not there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be visual. It can be auditory as well. And those are just markers to look out for. In terms of negative symptoms, those are usually characteristics that start lacking in a personality, such as social withdrawal. They become less interested in what's going on around them. Their speech starts to become affected. They start losing their sense of association. And they just start losing a general interest in what things are happening. And if you were diagnosed with schizophrenia, there could be two types of schizophrenia that you may be diagnosed with. Type 1 is made up of the positive symptoms of schizophrenia, and it's usually a result of biochemical abnormalities in the brain. Type 2 is the exact opposite, made up of negative symptoms of schizophrenia and a result of structural abnormalities in the brain. But like I said, in order for you to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, you have to be having at least two of the symptoms, maybe hallucinations, delusions, disoriented speech, feeling of withdrawal from society for at least a month. So this may not be the most educational way to introduce schizophrenia, but an interesting way to introduce schizophrenia to students is by showing them film and how film may introduce schizophrenia, and then afterwards talk about the educational part of it. My favorite film that deals with schizophrenia is a popular one, Fight Club. Now, Fight Club may be an extreme and unrealistic view of schizophrenia, but I think at the base of it all, it does introduce the idea of it and how it can affect somebody. And frankly, it's just an enjoyable movie. So the next thing we're going to talk about are three different aspects that may cause or discuss how schizophrenia is diagnosed among people. First, we'll start off with the multicultural aspect. So bad news for minorities. Minorities are more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia than white Americans. Minorities I'm referring to are, in this case, are African Americans, Latinos. Now, there is no exact reason why, though the text refers to poverty in which case sometimes minorities can't really afford the proper care for therapy and for help. So sometimes they're stuck dealing with what they have on their own. In other cases, it might be racial prejudice when it comes to therapists diagnosing certain patients with one thing as opposed to another. And in terms of white Americans, and in certain countries, they're more developed and more up to date with modern medicine, and easy to help others dealing with their diagnoses and illnesses. Now, is schizophrenia treated the same all over the world? The short answer is no. Before I mentioned more developed countries, saying that maybe white Americans might have access to better therapists and they have more money to spend on medicine, but studies have shown that in less developed countries, more individuals or have recovered better from schizophrenia than those in developed countries. Now, in the more developed countries, sometimes schizophrenia or mental illness in general are viewed with a negative stigma, and it's hard for the individuals like those to move along in the world when they have that stigma attached to them. In some countries, schizophrenia may not exactly be celebrated, but is not attached with a negative stigma, and it is something that is looked at and cared for by others in their country. They understand it's a mental illness, and they try to help the individual with loving care instead of negative stigma and labeling. Speaking of labeling, that's the next topic. Social labeling. Social labeling is pretty easy to explain. It's basically people labeling people. Just people judging others and giving them titles and labels just because they don't exactly conform to how they normally do things. And the label is difficult to get rid of. Just like a negative stigma, it stays attached to you. And even if you try as hard as you can to get rid of it, it just stays there. No matter how much improvement you're made, you're viewed having that. Even if I did have a mental illness, or I was even depressed, even if I made a lot of progress, and even if I thought I was feeling better, people around me will still think I'm depressed, and that's how they would see me as. Social labeling makes it difficult for those to improve. Especially those feeling that, what's the point of improving if that's how people are going to see you anyway? Aspect of social labeling is that sometimes just the labeling themselves is enough to diagnose somebody with that type of illness or what have you. If I was acting a certain way and a person didn't like it, they might just say, oh, he's acting like this way because he has schizophrenia or ADHD or something like that. And once that person says it, that's how they feel about you. That's how they feel the sickness is, and that you must have it because that's what they know. That type of diagnosis is scary because if the individual listens to that and feels that's what they have, they might start feeling that way and have this psychosomatic trauma and start diagnosing themselves with all these symptoms even though they might not have it. The next and final topic is going to be family dysfunctioning. Family dysfunctioning. Now, everybody has a crazy family. I don't know who you are if you think that you don't, but most families do. Now, me, for example, it's my mom. She drives me nuts, and she's have me thought that I was crazy before because she's always has to be right. And sometimes it can be fun in games until it actually becomes a problem, or sometimes parents don't know how to deal with their kids having mental illness. So that involves a lot of family stress. Now, parents with children with schizophrenia they deal with a lot of issues on their own. Sometimes the parents may be overpowering, overprotective, and then too involved with the children's lives for the children to grow out, be their own person. Secondly, they might have more trouble communicating with each other. The parents may not be as educated enough to understand what their child is going through. It may not comprehend why it's hard for the child to recover. Failing may hinder recovery as well. And what I mean by that is you may be impatient with the child and might want to rush things in order for the child to get better. That's what leads to the next comment about expressed emotion. The general level of criticism, disapproval, and hostility expressed in a family. Now, if a child has any mental illness, the expressed emotion will be very high, and it can disrupt normal family life and disrupt any recovery the child's making. That child needs support from the family, and is not going to be able to get it if the family is too preoccupied with what the child is supposed to do and how the child is supposed to be, and focus on the problem and trying to get support for the child. So there goes my final presentation for this class. As you can probably tell, I had a hard time speaking to the presentations. I usually have a stutter, so I try to speak very slowly in order to get my words out. I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to work on presentations like this. It's definitely helped me prepare for future projects. It helped me speak better in front of people. Thank you. Have a great day.